Hello, my name is Skylar.
And my name is Tyler.
Before you listen to the brand new season of Dad's podcast, Over the Rainbow,
We want to say a big thank you to the traditional owners of the land we're on today.
we're standing on the lands of the Wurundjeri people who have looked after this land for thousands and thousands of years.
Do you know which land you're on right now?
Do you? We want to pay our respects to elders past, present, and the ones who are growing up today, just like us. This land was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Over the Rainbow, a Queer Dads podcast series. This is Murray and I am your host. This week I am joined by Rodney Chiang-Cruise, an OG rainbow dad here in Australia. Rodney and his partner Jeff, together for 25 years, began their surrogacy journey in the US back in 2007. That journey brought them their son Ethan, who is no longer a rainbow child but now a fully fledged rainbow adult. Rodney shares what it was like to start a rainbow family at a time when society's idea of family was far less inclusive than it is today. By day, he's a lawyer, by night, an activist who has helped pave the way for thousands of rainbow dads in Australia to find connection and resources. In 2006, Rodney co-founded Gay Dads Australia and Gay Dads Surrogacy, social community hubs that have supported countless dads on their family journeys. And if that wasn't enough, Rodney has also helped create more rainbow babies through donor and co-parenting arrangements. With an impressive 5 rainbow kids, he is one big blended family that, as Rodney explains, just works. Rodney and his family are true trailblazers for rainbow dads in Australia. I think the biggest takeaway, and there were many, was the importance of community and having them close for guidance and resource sharing. I found our conversation not only educational, but deeply inspiring, and I hope you do too. Let's take a listen. So now I've had a chat with you about your family makeup, but it's probably better that you describe your rainbow family to me.
Okay, and rainbow family is the best way to describe it. We have 5 children. The first one is Ethan, who's 18, and he was born via surrogacy in the US. Then we have Justin and Archie. Justin is 17, about to turn 18, and Archie is 15. And they were born via a co-parenting arrangement we share with lesbian couple. And then we have Edie and Gus, the result of another co-parenting arrangement we have with another lesbian couple, and they're 6 and 5.
So you've got the whole sort of spectrum of age, really.
Yep. We've got
some successful adults and then some still children.
Yeah, and so far successful children. None of them have tried to burn down the houses yet, so that's good. No, it's a very unusual arrangement, but not that unusual aspect for rainbow families. But it has been very successful for us. I know it's not always successful in co-parenting relationships with some people. You often hear about those, but what you don't often hear about is successful relationships because they're not interesting. They're just successful. And as we know with all rainbow families, the success is just being able to exist as a family and do what families do. That's success.
So let's go back perhaps maybe 18 years ago when Ethan was a thought. Like how did it come about?
Well, I met my partner Jeff about 26 years ago, and fairly early on we decided that we wanted to have children, but how the hell were we going to do that?
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be 6 Bacardi Breezes in the back of a Barina, but it was, we had to think of some way. And we thought about adoption. That wasn't an option. We investigated foster care, and we thought maybe that was a pathway for us. But the more we looked into it, the more we thought that it really wasn't going to be us. We weren't the type of person who was strong enough to do foster care. You have to be a certain type of person with a certain strength, inner strength, and we didn't think we had that, certainly not at the time.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because even all those years later to now, I've interviewed a lot of dads and I've spoken to a lot of dads who have explored the foster care system and, similar to what you're saying, had decided it was too difficult. And I wonder, having lived overseas, whether that is the way that it's done in Australia. I've always often wondered, because of the wrongs that the government made with the stolen generation, that they now avoid adoption at all costs. The numbers of people adopting single figures. It's not even double figures.
That's right. And I've been on a couple of government committees where this issue has come up, and it's very much a reflection and a reaction to what has happened with the stolen generation, and a desire to avoid repeating any of those mistakes.
At the real detriment sometimes to the child in question.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. We looked at the foster care system 20 plus years ago. It wasn't very favourable to queer people. There was a push to say, we want queer people there because we want you to take on all these difficult children or older children, people who weren't being successful in the foster system. But we didn't want to give you adoption rights or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so you did have to have a certain constitution to be able to face up to the bureaucracy. And the other side of it, which was also hard for us, we weren't sure that we could develop a relationship with a child only to have that child be removed from our care.
Of course.
We didn't think we had the emotional stability and maturity to do that. And we decided what we really wanted to do was raise our own family. And we didn't know what to do. So we sat on that. We're still in the early stages of our relationship. And then my mother videotaped back on the old VHS a documentary that was on SBS one Sunday night. It was called 2 Men and a Baby, about a Melbourne gay couple, Lee and Tony, who had a child via surrogacy. And we went round for our usual Sunday roast at my mum's, and she said, I taped this last week. I thought you might like to have a look at it. She put it on.
What a great mum, by the way.
Yes. We weren't quite sure whether she was hinting or not. And Jeff and I just looked at each other and said, that's what we're going to do. We left that night thinking, we've got a pathway. But the question was, okay, we've seen the documentary, what the hell do we do? So we do what any good gay man did. We stalked Tony and Lee. We found out, we spoke to friends of friends of friends and found out somebody who knew them. And then we managed to get a phone number. And we reached out to Lee, rang him out of the blue very nervously and said, hi, Lee, we saw your video on SBS and we were just wondering if you'd be available to have a chat to us about how you go about surrogacy. And he said, yep, come around on Sunday. Okay. Gave us his address. So we popped around and we introduced ourselves and everything. And he said, you're not the first couple. You're about the seventh couple who's tracked us down.
Wow. That's amazing. Do you know, just on that, I went and saw that documentary at Fed Square, and I remember them doing a Q&A, and then later on, paths crossed again, obviously with Lee and his work in the community sector, but Stephen worked with Tony.
Yes, because Tony was at Freehills, yes.
Yeah.
That was our journey, and because there were so many people who were bashing on their door saying, how do you do it, how do you do it? We all got together and formed Gay Dads Victoria and Gay Dads Australia. That's how it began.
Love that.
Because we had all these people who wanted to know more, and all we had was basically Tony and Lee as a resource. And we were starting the process. So each of us was getting bits of information, dealing with problems that came up, etc. And we thought, we've got to centralise this. So we started this group, and on the premise that it was going to be a pay it forward group, because it kept growing. Other people would find out about it and say, we're interested in doing that. And so we started the surrogacy process that way. And we were very fortunate. We got pregnant the first time with Ethan. Wow. From the start of the process to the end of the process was about 17 months.
It was a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind. Mm-hmm. We had no idea what we were doing. It's done half a world away in the US. We talk about Australian and American culture being very similar, and it is in many ways, but when you're dealing with Americans in this sort of sector, they're all very positive and up and hyper and everything's can do and yes, sir, and all that sort of stuff. And Australians tend to be these, I don't want to bother you, but could I ask this? You know, and we learned, it took us a while, but we learned that, you know, you had to be on the front foot, and Americans didn't care that you were being, you know, what we would think is pushy or maybe a bit assertive. That was just normal for them. And once we learned that, it made the whole process a much easier process. Having said that, it was very stressful.
Why is that? The distance?
Distance, yes. Everything happened when we were asleep. So, you know, we'd go to bed thinking, oh, God, I hope there's not a phone call. You went from thinking, well, no news is good news, because once you're pregnant, nothing really happens.
Yes.
You just got to wait, and you got to, in your relationship with your surrogate is what you have to build. We were very fortunate. We had an amazing surrogate and her family, and they're still part of our family today. You know, we've been out to see them. They've been out to see us. We've met halfway in Hawaii, which was much more fun.
Yes.
And,
cocktails by the beach.
Well, yes, there was lots of cocktails. It was a really good experience for us, but it was stressful. All these things are stressful because you just don't know. But the group that formed out of that, which was Gay Dads Australia, was great because it gave us an opportunity to share experiences and pull, even things like, you know, where do you stay when you land in LA? You know, what's the best place to stay? Which is closest to the clinic? What do you do when you have to go and dump your junk? I don't know if this is an X-rated thing, but you have to dump your junk at some stage. And we were advised that I'll bring your own
junk.
Well, bring your own entertainment material.
Oh, right, okay.
Because the clinics, whilst it's in the US and they're in LA and it's primarily deals with gay people.
Yeah, they've got Playboy and...
Yeah, they've got straight porn. Yes. So, you know, you put in this little room with these vinyl couches and horrible overhead fluorescent lights. It's not the place you feel sexy, I can tell you. It's like being 12 o'clock at night in a 7-Eleven. You got to understand, this was before the iPhone.
Yes, yes.
So it was a little bit harder. There was lots of serious things.
Yes.
How do you deal with lawyers? How do you deal with the court system over there? Because when your child is born, you have to get a parentage order. And it depends on which state you're in, and it depends on which county you're in. And they go judge shopping, which we didn't understand. When our son was born in Ohio, but the county that we're in, our lawyer said, oh, no, we don't want to get that judge there because they're homophobic. Right. We're going to shop around. And so we went 2 counties over and got a judge to do it.
Who was guiding that process?
Our agency was doing that. We did have a good agency. I should say we used the same agency that Tony and Lee did, as did everybody at that stage, because nobody knew any better.
Tried and tested.
And we're all nervous. You know, this was vast sums of money that we were handing over, and we were thinking, you know, well, what's going to come of it? So we went with the tried and true thing. And look, they were big and they were very successful. They weren't cheap, but I can honestly tell you that, you know, there's no such thing as cheap surrogacy. Even if you do altruistic surrogacy in Australia, it's still not cheap. There's still
absolutely
everybody gets paid, except maybe your surrogate. But everybody else gets paid,
which is up for discussion.
Yes,
now.
Yes, that's true. It was an interesting process. It was stressful. There was so much paperwork and so many contracts and documents that you would review. And then there was medical things. Every time there was a test or a scan, or your egg donor had to inject herself with hormones, you'd get all this information. And for those of us who don't have any medical background like us, we're looking at going, well, I don't know if this is good or bad. I don't know what these figures read, but we were getting over-stimulated with information. But having the group there was great because it was the opportunity where we could reach out and say, does anybody know what these figures are? And we're lucky there'd be a doctor in the group. So you know, they'd say, oh, that's nothing to worry about. You don't have to worry about that.
And so Gay Dads Australia still exists, as does all the other state-based ones. And you're talking about being there at its inception. The same stuff is still happening. The guys are sharing with each other and sharing resources and sharing tips. Even this podcast is an extension of that.
Yeah. It's so much better now than it was then. Yes. I mean, we had this very small group. It was word of mouth.
Yeah.
It existed on a platform called Yahoo Groups, which some people may remember.
I remember, yeah.
So that's where it existed. we didn't, I mean, I think Facebook had just started, but we weren't using Facebook.
But it does sort of like show you that the need to be able to have your community around you, supporting you, using resources and stuff, that still exists today for queer parents, is that usually when they start that journey, it's we want to talk to other people that have done it.
You're absolutely right. I think one thing that queer people do really well is organise communities, and they organise them quickly and efficiently, and they're not always successful, but we're very good at getting a disparate group of people who usually separated by location together, and and the internet's been great to assist with that, because we all come from that. Certainly my generation, and I suspect it's true a lot today, maybe less so, but we come from a background where we hid ourselves, or hid at least part of ourselves. I'm sure many of us grew up thinking, I'm the only one.
Mm-hmm.
There's that sense of isolation. So when the opportunity to reach out and form networks and communities comes along, we do tend to latch onto it really quite quickly.
Yeah.
And there is always a good core group of people who are willing to make it work, to put the efforts in to get the networking going, the communication platform working, and to start resourcing it. It's been amazing watching how it's changed over the years, from this Yahoo group, which was lots of emails back and forwards, to where we've got podcasts, where we've got Facebook, where we've got lots of groups actually meeting. I mean, I look at groups around the country like New South Wales, and Western Australia is an amazing group. Lots of young families over there who have done surrogacy, and it's a great community, and they've got a lot of distance between them as well, because Western Australia's so big. And it's not just Gay Dads Australia and Gay Dads Victoria which started it all. It comes from Rainbow Families and groups before then. But this sense of paying it forward and helping others, I think it's just been a wonderful, wonderful development.
Do you know, before you arrived, I sort of split our chat into 3 different areas. One is the family creation, obviously the parenting milestones, but then the advocacy and the support networks. So it's very interesting that we dive straight into those support networks that you needed to create your family. And they, as you have just rightly pointed out, exist today, but they're obviously a lot more readily available. Let's talk about Ethan being born. What I'm really curious about is those parenting milestones. So let's start from the start, and hopefully we'll be able to cover right up to him being that successful adult.
Well, I think the first parenting milestone for us was when we went over there for the IVF transfer. So we had gone there a week or so earlier, and we had created the embryos. And in those days, it was 3-day-old embryos that were implanted, and our surrogate had flown in from Ohio, because this was all done in California. And we had met her once before. We had communicated with her numerous times between then and now, but this is the first time we were in a hotel room together chatting, and, the next day we were going to be impregnating her with our child, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And, that was a milestone, because we were all nervous. We were all walking on eggshells, trying to not say the wrong thing and all that sort of stuff. And we were doing something that traditionally is done in a very intimate way, or maybe not so intimate in the Barina or something like that. But
with the Bacardis.
Yeah, with the Bacardis. But, it was quite a significant moment.
Yeah.
We next saw her after she'd been implanted with Ethan, and she was lying on the bed. We sat there and we held her hand and struggled to think of things to talk about.
Yeah.
At that stage, we weren't close.
No.
It was almost transactional.
Yes.
We were with her for 3 days. Then she flew back to Ohio. We flew back to Australia, and we waited. And about 4 days later, we got a phone call from the nurse at the clinic saying, it was 3:00 in the morning, because they have no concept of time outside America. And they rang us and said, just letting you know that your pregnancy test is positive. And that was it. She just said, okay, bye. And we thought, okay, what does that all mean?
That would have been a sleepless night.
Yeah, we were very excited. We didn't get back to sleep after that.
Yeah.
And then the milestones, this sounds maybe a little bit anti-milestones, but the milestones was the stress that then went on for the first 12, 15 weeks as we waited to see that pregnancy would take.
Did you keep it to yourself or did you tell people?
We kept it to ourselves for the first 12 weeks.
Oh, wow. That would have been difficult.
People knew we had gone over and we had done this. They were tempted to ask, and we would say, we will tell you if there's any news, good or bad. So don't ask us because
back off.
It's just we weren't alone because at those weeks around us doing it, other friends were doing it at the same time, and thankfully most of them were successful, but some weren't.
Yes.
So that milestone of waiting to tell people was tempered by the fact that we had friends who were doing it at the same time, and they may not have been as lucky as we were or something like that. So because we're all going on this journey together with our new friends in the gay dads community, or gay dads to be, as it was then, we had to temper the excitement about those milestones because other people may not be so lucky, and we wanted to make sure we supported each other. That was the whole point of the group.
Mm-hmm.
But then once, I think it was probably about week 13, we started telling people, we started telling family and friends that we were going to have a baby. And then I suppose the next milestone for us was preparing the nursery.
Mm.
You don't want to do it too early.
No.
And
did you know that you were having a boy?
At about 20 weeks, yes, we had a scan and we got told, we didn't ask, we were going to ask, but the doctor just told us, your son will be born on this. So we're having a boy. Oh, yeah, didn't we tell you? Oh, yeah. Okay.
No, you didn't, but thank you.
That's sort of that milestone was getting the nursery ready. That sort of started making things real. I mean, we were at Babies R Us and Kmart and all these places looking at things and buying things that, in hindsight, we would never use.
No.
We didn't even take the labels off half of them.
We were like that with the monitors. I don't know if you were the same. It's like they're right next to us. We don't need the monitors.
Yes. It may sound a little trivial and maybe silly, but it was actually a milestone for us actually doing that. It made us feel that this pregnancy, which was occurring half a world away, was something that was becoming real.
For sure. Those little things that you were doing was your way of the pregnancy happening for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we flew over for the birth, and Callie was going to be induced. And it was around New Year's. Ethan was born on the 3rd of January, so she wanted to be induced so she could go back to work because it's America.
Yes. They get like 2 weeks or something.
Yeah. And we're in rural Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. This massive hospital with, a population of, 10,000 in the town.
Yeah.
And that was a milestone. It was a milestone in many ways. We were in rural Ohio, never had a surrogacy birth, certainly not to a gay couple. And so we rocked up to the hospital thinking, what's this going to be like? And we were treated like rock stars.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yes.
And so that was quite good. That made that aspect of it easier because you just never know.
You never know
how it's going to go. And we were in with Callie and her husband when Ethan was born. We were standing at either side of her, and the birth went pretty seamlessly.
Yeah,
there was a few little hiccups along the way, and Ethan was born, and we had to make arrangements about what was going to happen after the birth. So who was going to hold the baby first, and who was going to cut the cord. So that had to be arranged. So the nurses knew what to do. So Jeff was going to cut the umbilical cord, and I was going to have the first hold. And so Jeff cut the cord. He was a bit squeamish about that.
Yeah.
Because, is it going to hurt? And all
that
sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I got to hold Ethan first, but, I was getting ready to, and the nurses just came and just physically pushed me into a chair. We don't let dads hold a baby standing up.
Oh, okay, right.
Because they tend to faint. So pushed me down, and I got to hold Ethan, and I blubbed.
Yeah.
I cried and cried, and partly because it had been obviously an emotional journey all the way there, but also we hadn't slept for like 48 hours. Then after that, they put Ethan in a little crib, and we were staying in the room next door to where Callie was, and they said, we've got to finish with Callie, so you can take the baby back to your room. And so we did. We pushed Ethan back to our room. It's just me, Jeff, and Ethan wrapped up, and nobody else.
Yeah.
And we go, okay. Now what
Good
do
luck.
we do?
Yes, yeah.
We're parents. What do you do? And we
Yeah.
just stared at him and kept checking that he was breathing.
Yes.
Something that's etched in your mind, and I don't think any parent, but certainly no gay parent, goes through having a child, however they become parents, and forget that moment.
Yeah.
It's
Which
quite
must be
powerful.
very surreal for you talking about that, having Ethan's 18 now.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. No, he was such a cute little baby, and all those years where he would hold your hand and hug you and all that. Now he's taller than us and sort of pats us on the head and
Panda's bit of attitude, bit of sass.
yes.
Yeah.
Teenage boy, bit of attitude.
Yeah.
You know, we've been through the whole gaming years.
Yeah.
And I know lots of dads out there will know exactly what I mean about the gaming years and how frustrating that can be. So he's 18 now, and that was a milestone in itself. I mean, I was more prepared for Ethan becoming an adult, legally an adult, than Jeff was. Jeff hangs on to this notion of he's still my little baby boy.
Yeah, that will probably never change, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I share that to some degree, but I've also really enjoyed watching him grow and develop as a young man and into an adult. Been really pleased to see how he has embraced that. He makes choices that I wouldn't necessarily make, but then again, as my mum points out to me, or you made choices that nobody would make when you were
The
young.
cycle repeats.
Yes.
Yes.
But it's been great. It's been wonderful to see it. And we've also been blessed with, over the years, we've done a lot of media and advocacy for surrogacy and gay dads and rainbow families. And Ethan's been part of that journey. And the good thing is that you mentioned earlier about the surrogacy review that's going on in Australia. Ethan put in a submission recently in relation to commercial surrogacy and why I thought it was overdue in Australia. And he based that on because last year during his VCE year, year 12 year, part of his English exam, he had to write a persuasive paper, and he wrote it on commercial surrogacy in Australia and why he thought it was important for surrogates to be compensated.
Yeah.
And he drew heavily on the fact that his surrogate in the US, Callie, who he's very close to, was compensated, and he saw how that changed her life. I mean, when we were matched with Callie very early on, just taking it back a bit, we asked her, well, why do you want to be a surrogate? And she gave several answers that were parallel to each other. One was, as well, I like being pregnant, I enjoy it. I've always wanted to help other couples have children. And she goes, and the money would be good because I can use it to help send my daughters to college. She had two daughters around about 6 and 8 at the time.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, this is a good woman. You know, she's doing it for her own family. She's got the right attitude. And we've made sure that Ethan has understood Callie's motivation, not just from us, but from Callie as well. So he's understood the motivations because we always think that in any rainbow family, your origin story is really, really important. And it's important for kids to know the details in fine detail, understand all the motivations and own it.
For sure. Which is, I mean, this conversation could go off in all different paths, but for context for anyone listening, altruistic surrogacy, which is not for money or not to be paid, is the only form of surrogacy that's legal in Australia. A commercial surrogacy, where the woman is actually compensated for carrying a child, is only available in some countries, which is why rainbow dads go overseas for that. Let's fast forward to Ethan being a child, and you're in Australia. And what did that look like?
Well, as many listeners will know, that when you do surrogacy overseas, in a country like the US, your child comes back to Australia, you may have a US court order that says you're the parents, legal parents, but as soon as you come back into Australia, your child has no legal parents. And that manifested itself in a couple of ways. Once was when Callie came out to visit us. Callie and Mike, her husband, came out to visit us in Australia. They got off the plane, we picked them up. Ethan was in the child seat next to us, and we said, well, you're now the legal parents of Ethan. And they looked horrified. I thought, God, we don't want another child.
We're just coming for a holiday.
Yes. And we explained it to them. They were just shocked and horrified at it. The irony being, if they could have taken Ethan and hopped on a plane and gone back to the US, But as soon as they landed, they were being arrested for kidnapping because in the US, they're not the legal parents.
Yeah.
So this paradox exists.
Yes.
And that sort of sat beneath everything that we did in the early days. We thought, we're not legally the parents. What's going to happen when we enroll him at childcare? Is that going to be an issue? What about enrolling him at school? What about when we have to rush into hospital if that's the case? And all those things occurred, of course. So we had to enrol him in childcare. They didn't care. They were concerned about disputes.
Yeah.
They didn't care who the biological parents were. They just wanted to know about disputes. So that was easy. Same thing at primary school. There was no issue there. And when Ethan was about 6 months, we rushed him to hospital. Over-eager parents, we overreacted, but we rushed him to hospital at 3:00 in the morning because we thought he was very unwell. And we took him to a hospital in Melbourne called Cabrini, which is a Catholic private hospital because it has an amazing paediatric system. So we took him there and we were worried about, oh God, we're not the legal parents. How's this going to go? And we walked in and the triage nurse just looked up over her half glasses at us and said, "Are you the dads in plural?" And we just said, yes. She goes, "Do you have insurance?" And I thought, is this a slice of America or what? And that was the only questions that was asked. Are we were the dads? And we said, yes, we are. And she said, okay, well, can you fill in the paperwork? And that's where we went. So we had those anxiety moments, and I think they exist for all gay dads who are in this situation.
Still to this day, it's that level of anxiety. And then when the situation plays out, it's never as worse as what you've feared in your head.
Absolutely.
But being a new parent and the relentlessness of being a parent and the no sleep and all of that kind of stuff, to then be carrying an anxiety of, oh, is this situation going to play out nicely, or, is this going to work in my favor or whatever? It's something that you can't be sort of swept under the carpet. It needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, and a lot of people would ask us, oh, do I have to carry paperwork? The surrogacy agreement, the legal paperwork from the US, and all, do I have to carry that around with me all the time? And what do I do? And we quickly learnt through our experiences and the experience of our peers who were going through it at the same time that certainly in Australia, people don't care. And my experience since then, through our own experience and watching other people go through this, is that people don't care where your child comes from, how they were created, what the family structure is in. What people really care about is your child loved, looked after, cared for. They're the things that they look out for. And if they see that or sense that with the child, it's a big tick. That's okay. That's fine. Great. Not my business. I'm not concerned. I'm just happy that the child is wanted, loved, needed. The only time people get their hackles up, and this doesn't apply to gay people, this applies to everybody, is if they fear the child is in danger or there's a threat to the child or something like that. That's when people will be nosy parkers, if you like.
And you want them to be, really.
And you want them to be.
Yeah.
So what we found was, despite the media, despite the Australian Christian lobby, who were very noisy back then, despite all those naysayers who dominate a lot of the media discourse for obvious reasons because they're whingy, the reality was people in the community were really welcoming. They were curious. Oh, God, how many times have they said, oh, so there's no mother, so how's child born and what's surrogacy? And you have to go through this relentless experience. And this was true not just for us, but for our kids as well. They have to answer these questions too when they get older. Their peers ask, I'll say, where's your mum? Oh, you don't have a mum. And we, as adults, as parents, we have to bite the bullet and be polite and answer those questions time and time again, because what we're doing is building an environment that for our kids can be safe in. And as painful and as annoying and frustrating and as insulting as some of the questions can be, we go through this process of talking that narrative to other people, to educating them. And we quickly pass on that to our children. Our children have to do it as soon as they're able to talk, when they're at kindergarten and stuff like that. And these are the topics of conversation about parents because they're the key individuals in a child's life. So that's what they talk about. So it's giving them the skills and the language to be able to talk about it age appropriately, but in a confident way that doesn't make them feel othered or different.
Yes.
Not easy. And a lot of people certainly in the early days of Gay Dads, it was a big question. So what do we do? What do we do when there's a Mother's Day thing at school or a Father's Day thing at school? How do we navigate that? And it was it was trial and error. And a lot of the times it was more the anxiety of the parents than the kids. The kids just didn't care.
For sure, yeah. Would you say, though, back then the inclusive language, now they don't even call it the Mother's Day stall, they call it the special person's stall. And you really understand why that's about. Was the inclusive language?
No.
Wouldn't think so.
I mean, I go back and look through some of the old archives of our discussions, and there'd be me and there'd be somebody else and another person. We're all going to it because our kids are all in prep or grade 1. We'd be going to the school council or the principal saying, you need to change this. Your forms say mother and father and blah blah blah, and we never got nobody ever got pushback from it. There was maybe a bit of hesitation saying, oh, okay, well, how do I go about changing these forms? What I found was the best thing was I take the form in with it amended and say, and not ask them to change, say, you need to change it to this because it's excluding my child. And they'd go, oh, didn't mean to do that. And I said, yeah, I know you didn't mean to do it, but now's a good opportunity.
Yeah,
for
I'm alerting you to it. So, yeah.
And we found in most cases, people in authorities at schools or healthcare centres and all that were open to changes.
Yeah.
They weren't anti it at all, and the forms just reflected long established traditional forms that nobody ever looked at and just assumed, because let's face it, we fill in forms all the time and we quickly flick through all those questions, and those of us who identify as male or female, we get to the gender question and we put male or female. But if you're non-binary or trans and you just see those two options, you feel excluded. And so it's not necessarily out of malice.
No,
but
you always assess the intent, don't you?
You assess the intent and you try and, where you've got an opportunity, you educate.
Yeah.
And just taking it back, you educate your kids too as you go along. And I think we do it unwittingly, but we're doing it all the time. We're giving them the language skills that are age appropriate so they can be their own advocates.
For sure.
And particularly once they get to teens, and this is another milestone, where they go from pre-teens to teens, they go from there wanting to hold your hand to, actually, can you park around the corner, please?
I did that to my dad, Can you just, Dad, please park around the corner? I don't want them to see. And he'd beep the horn.
Yeah. And I think that's a rite of passage for all kids, regardless of their parenting or their family structure. It's at that stage where they're developing their own sense of identity and their own sense of purpose in the world, if you like, that they really need to have that language skill because they need to be able to control it. And the good thing is, I think in most cases, gay dads do a really good job. We can't hide what our family structure is. It is what it is.
It's pretty evident, isn't it, Mother?
A straight couple can do surrogacy and hide it from the world and their child, and they do. But a gay couple can't do that. A lesbian couple can't do that. So our kids are forced early to learn the language. And so they go into those really critical years of teenage years. Whether you realize it or not, your kids are doing this. They're amassing the language and the arguments and the narratives that they need to be able to negotiate the peers that ask questions or the teachers who ask questions, those sort of things. And
were they regular conversations that you had with your children? Were they coming back to you? I'm just reflecting with you, hearing you say that. I kind of equip my kids with the language, and if you're asked in the playground, where's mum? This is what you can say. What I found, though, I mean, I've got a 7 and 8 and 9-year-old, is for my daughter particularly, she would say, we had come up with to say, but then the next day the kids would be saying, so where's your mum? It'd be the same thing every day. And so she would come back very frustrated and said, I'm telling them what we've come up with to say about why I've got 2 dads, but then they're asking the same question again.
It does happen, and different kids handle it different ways. Ethan, when he got sick of those questions and he'd just ignore them and just not friend those people.
Yeah.
He just said, oh, they're just not people I want to be friends with. And that's a totally valid way of handling it. I've heard other kids who would snap back and just say, I told you before, and you've been a bully or whatever. And then others who would get quite upset about it because they didn't feel confident enough to react. It's the latter group is the one that you need to worry about, I think, because they're the ones who are struggling to assert themselves in that sort of situation. And that's when, it's it's appropriate to go have a conversation with their classroom teacher and just say, look, we're aware of this is happening. You're probably not, but maybe you could have a chat to the class about different family structures, not identify anybody in particular. But there will be, in any modern cohort of kids, there will be a range of family structures. There'll be divorced parents.
For sure.
Step parents, single parents.
Yeah. Which is great when you're talking to your children to describe, blah, blah, your friend, they've got two mums and one dad that lives over here. Just, that it's not, I always say to my kids, most of the kids in your school will have a mum and dad, but not all the kids. Some have got two dads, some have got two mums. There's one kid that lives with the grandma, doesn't even have contact.
Yep.
And so you just describe all that. But I would imagine as the child gets older, like you say, they pick up the language and the tools to be able to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we want for our kids, is we cannot be there being the advocate or the arguer all the time. You always want to protect your kids. You want to be there to defend them and all that sort of stuff. But you're not going to be able to do that. And the best thing that you can do is give them the skills and the confidence to be proud of who they are. And we always talk about in our family, right from when Ethan was born, and then with Justin, we always talk about you take pride in your family, however it's made and however it changes. We always talked about how families change. You might add another child, and the child might be a different child from a different family, or co-parenting or whatever. A parent may leave, a parent may join. Your family is broader than just the generational difference between you and your parents. It includes your grandparents and your cousins. And we also talk about, because in all queer families, or most queer families, donor conception is part of the story, whether it's surrogacy or co-parenting or sperm donor or whatever. So we talk about families are who you choose, the people that you choose. So our son asked about certain relatives, my cousins, are like, why don't we see them? Why don't we have them? Well, I have nothing in common with them. But they're your family. I said, well, technically you can call them my family, but I think of the neighbour across the road who I've lived, across from 20 years. They're my family. They're more my family. They're the ones I'd rush to if they called out and said, I need a hand. I'd be over there. And my cousins called out of the blue. I don't even know. I'm not even sure what they look like now. I haven't seen them in 30 years. So.
No, I hear what you're saying is that, the notion of what a family is.
Yes.
And that's very relevant in this makeup. Before we run out of time, I'm really curious to know, let's talk about tweens and teens, getting into that period, because we're talking about they love you when they're younger and they want to hold your hand and they call you daddy and you're just like the center of their world, which is where I am with my kids at the moment.
You're their hero.
I'm their hero. And, they say things all the time that really just boost me. I'm like, oh God, these kids are fantastic cheerleaders. But that saying, and I hear it all the time, enjoy this moment because it won't last. It'll be over before you know it. What does that resonate for you?
It's true. It does change, but
does it go by as quickly as what they say?
Oh, much quicker.
Yeah.
much quicker. But I wouldn't frame it so negatively.
Yeah.
Yes, we talk about it negatively in a lot of ways because we are humouring ourselves and each other about it. What it is it's a change. They go from you go from being their hero, their god, the center of their universe, to when they that tweens to teenager, where they start discovering themselves. They start discovering that there are other people, other families, other interests, and it changes. And you feel that maybe I'm losing out. You're not. You're not being displaced. You're still incredibly important to them, and you find out when they turn 18. I'll get to that in a sec.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're doing is expanding their horizons and discovering that. And I can say in hindsight, don't be scared of it. Don't fear it. I did fear it. I was terrified of it. I thought I'm losing my baby. But in
hindsight, it would be gradual, right?
It is great. Well, yes, it is gradual, but you'll see marked times. There'll be moments when the first time you go to hold the hand and they say, I don't want to hold your hand.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a bit odd. Or the first time you're dropping them at school, they're 14, and they said, Dad, can you just park around the corner? I don't want my friends see me get out of the car and think, oh, okay. And, there'll be those moments I'll be like, oh. But it's that assertion of independence. And
it's so funny because I had my 9-year-old son like 2 weeks ago, always walked them into school, and I was holding my daughter's hand, I was holding my son's hand, and he pulled it away, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, oh, do we have to do this I love you stuff? And I said, what? And he goes, look, I'm fine with the I love you and the kissing and hugging at home, just not in public, Dad.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I held Tala's hand and it was all good. And then it was fine. Like, I was very cool. Do you want to hold my hand? It was another day and he held my hand, but it was that little moment of, oh, okay, he's growing up.
You're going to be fearful of it. You're going to think it's a changing point and, your baby's not your baby anymore. But it's actually a growth point.
Yes.
And it's really important that they do it and explore it. And you fear for it during the turbulent teens where they lock themselves in their room and they get, the boys predominantly, not just boys, but they get into gaming and they're so obsessed with it, all that sort of stuff. But when they get, like, Ethan's turned 18 and he's turning into an adult, and that means he's understanding what responsibility is. And, we're telling him, this is your responsibility. Well, I'm not cleaning up your mess.
Yes.
You pay for your own petrol, that sort of thing. So, but you do see them turn back a bit and they see themselves still part of the family, but as a young adult part of the family. So they take on responsibilities and accept, that there's consequences to their actions that Daddy's not going to clean up and deal with all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful cycle that you see. Now, it's not going to be true for all parents. It certainly wasn't true for my parents with me. I wasn't necessarily like that. That took me till I was the 30s to get back to that stage. But seeing it happen with Ethan and also seeing it happen with Justin as well, because he's about to turn 18, is really rewarding because I say to Jeff sometimes, I think we've done okay.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine says, who has twins who are the same age as Ethan, they were born 2 weeks apart. He said, yeah, I always look at it like this. They're not in jail. And, they've got jobs and they're studying and they're doing all that sort of stuff. So we must have done something right. Yeah. Even if you sense sometimes that you are the absolute biggest inconvenience to their lives. And let's face it, when we were 18, our parents were an inconvenience to us. We needed them. We still needed them for board and money and all that sort of stuff. But they were an inconvenience because we wanted to go off and do things that were exploring our independence and our adulthood.
It does make me laugh though, because you just get this sense of, like, the kids looking at you like you're everything and knowing that is going to flip on its head. And your fear is, or my fear is anyway, is that when, they're teenagers, they're not going to want anything to do with you.
They will, but it'll be selective. When you're around their friends and their mates and their spaces, you have to accept that you've got to step back out of the limelight. But you are incredibly important for when they get out of those spaces and they come home. They still need their dad.
Yeah.
They still need somebody to cry on the shoulder, help them with their homework, give them advice. That's where the family structure comes in and that safety at home. Look, there's this wonderful poem or saying that goes around every now and then. I see it and I always think I must print that out. If you're lonely, come home. If you don't have any money, come home. If you feel unloved, come home. That sort of thing, just centering it back on the family and the home.
And wherever you always have a home.
Yeah, wherever you are. And I think if you do that and your kids grow up and knowing that that's the truth, that they can go through these absolutely normal stages of development, which we all fear at the time when they happen, like, don't pick me up after school or park around the corner, that sort of stuff. But we go through that. It will cycle back, and as we all hope that they'll be there in our old age to keep us away from, bad lighting and out of old people's homes, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's it. It is very interesting. Did Ethan rebel, or did any of your children rebel? And how did you handle that?
I think, and I think this will not come as a shock to anybody with teenage boys particularly. I think the rebellion comes around gaming. Gaming is a really challenging thing, not just for gay families, for all families, because it's a a space that we don't necessarily occupy ourselves, and we don't know what's going on there. We're a bit concerned about stranger danger. We see a development. Everybody sees a development in sort of aggressive or semi-aggressive language coming from the kids when they're playing games.
What gaming was it?
It was everything from Call of Duty to Fortnite.
Yeah.
I say that with...
it's a world that you didn't know about or want to know about.
Yeah. I played Halo when I was younger and all that, but it wasn't in an online environment with other people talking to you.
Because now it's all Roblox. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, Roblox. Yeah, he went through that phase as well.
Yeah.
When they get to the more shoot-'em-up games, it can get quite aggressive.
Yes.
And the thing is, I think that's where you think there's a bit of rebellion because they're in this world that you're unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a world that you're excluded from because they've got their headphones on and they're talking to their mates. And there's, we try to manage it in terms of who his mates were, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say, you're only playing with school friends, but then there'd be a friend of a friend, and every now and then there'd be 49-year-old man on there as well. And you think, okay, well.
Yes, well, this is the thing. Yeah.
So, that was, and if we challenged Ethan at that stage, you don't understand, you don't know what you're talking about, it's all safe, it's all fine, because from their perspective it is.
Yes.
From our perspective, we see the threats.
Yeah, for sure. Which is our job, right?
Yeah, which is our job.
Yeah.
So that is a challenging issue. And with all our kids, with the three that have been through that, the three boys, we've managed it, hopefully. Well, we think we have. I fear for I understand the anxiety parents who are going through it right now are feeling, and I just say stick with it and just keep parenting as you'll normally do. Just explain what the dangers are. Also, this is something that didn't happen in my youth, and I think it's really important to say my parents and the parents of my parents' generation or their generation never really were honest about what the dangers were. They'd say, it's dangerous, and that was it. What I found with our kids was you explain exactly what the danger is. There are these people out there, generally men, older men, who pretend to be kids so they can...
Great advice.
And
don't sugarcoat it.
Don't sugarcoat it. Kids understand.
Yeah.
And they're already talking about it anyway, maybe not as sophisticated or nuanced ways, but they're already talking about it. So have those honest conversations with them. And kids get it.
Yeah.
I always say, kids get it. Parents get stressed about it. And if you talk to about each other, it alleviates both things. They get a bit more knowledge and you get less stress.
I've always found that the more simplistic you are with explaining things and don't sugarcoat it or don't try it, just say what it is, kids understand. Rodney, before we finish up, I want to ask you this. If you could go back in time and have a chat with yourself, what would you say? What advice or what would you say to yourself?
Before children?
No, with children.
You don't need to get so stressed over the small things.
Yeah.
They really do resolve.
They don't matter.
They don't matter, and they tend to age you for no reason. You end up obsessing about things that for the kids, like, you worry about how my kid's going to deal with Mother's Day at childcare, and the kids are absolutely fine with it. Yeah, so you don't obsess with those sort of things so much, and go back to that original thing. Just have honest conversations with the kids. Say, what do you do at Mother's Day and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and kids have an inbuilt resilience. I mean, you teach them resilience, but they have that inbuilt as well.
Yes, yeah. Most kids do. Not all kids do, and some kids will be more emotional and more stressed than others, and you just have to play that by ear. The general rule is be honest with them. They get it more than we do, and they don't necessarily. They will often see the good in things, whereas we often assume the negative and the worst in things, and they're often incompatible. If you start talking about them, you get into a much more sensible place for the kids. If you've got concerns, confront them straight away.
Yeah.
And that's usually not with the kids. It's usually with the people surrounding the kids, teachers, educators, health professionals. Have that conversation. Don't shy away from it.
Amazing advice. I'm hesitant because I don't know how you'll feel about this, but you are kind of an elder, aren't you?
Yeah, well, my children think I'm old. I said, geez, you're old.
You've kind of paved the way. You know, I've admired you for a long time because you've set up those networks and things that, you know, the Gay Dads Australia, there's Rainbow Dads Victoria, and you were kind of there at the start. And these are things now that we benefit from. So thank you.
Thank you for that. But I think it's looking back, it's all very nice to look back and, you know, I can be proud of, you know, being part of that with a lot of other people at that time. But I think the real success of all this is the fact that they're still going and they're thriving and they're bigger, and there are so many more rainbow families and gay dad families out there than ever before. And you know, I've heard this, that people on Grindr, not that I get on Grindr or anything like that, but I've heard that when people get on Grindr and they're having chats with each other, one of the questions comes up is, if it's not just a hookup, but somebody looking for something more, do you want children? And I'm thinking, geez, I would never have, it was never a thought in my mind. But isn't it interesting that a lot of young people now looking at relationships and starting those relationships, do you want children?
It's wonderful.
It's
wonderful,
great. Yeah. And I actually think gay dads make fabulous parents.
So do I.
I don't know how to quantify it or qualify it, but I just see maybe it comes from the adversity of having to grow up gay and define yourself and survive and all that sort of stuff. But I just see the wonderful families they're creating and the amazing children that are, you know, seem to be happy and successful and proud of their families. I haven't seen one family where the kids are not proud of their family.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And I think that's a symbol of success.
Wonderful. Rodney, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dream of